I bonds have kind of started making the news. And just to give this some perspective, like when I say like FOMO, like in from I think March of 2021 to March of 2022, like that 12-month period, $11 billion was invested in I bonds. And if you look at, excuse me, the 6-month period, $11 billion was invested in I bonds. And then if you look at the year before that, it was 1 billion. So we've gone from 1 billion during a 6-month period to 11 billion the following year during the same 6-month period. And so this has become like everybody's doing it sort of thing, right? And so I thought it was interesting because you actually taught me this when we were talking about the show idea. And I was like, hey, I want to research this idea because I don't really invest in I bonds. I want to learn more about it. It sounds like everybody's doing it. And you're like, Jimmy, what, you think I bonds are a good idea? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how I bonds work and maybe, you know, why it may not be a great idea or maybe why it is. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, let's talk about it. All right, so I bonds, for those who are not aware, I bonds are inflation protected bonds. So let's go from very large view. So a bond is when you are loaning somebody money and they're paying you back with interest. So when people talk about, oh, I'm going to buy a bond, it usually means they're going to loan either the government or some company or some state money, and that money is going to be paid back to them in interest. And the note that you get that they're going to pay back your money with interest is called a bond, right? So a bond is when you're loaning somebody money, and there's different kinds of bonds that you can have, right? So you can take out a bond or loan money to the federal government. And those are like treasury bonds or governmental bonds or federal bonds, if you will, right? You can loan money to the state that you live in. So I live in Georgia. Jimmy lives in North Carolina. We could each loan money to our state, right? And those are a separate kind of bond. You can loan money to a corporation or a private company, and those are, corporate bonds. So there's different kinds of bonds that you can take out. And historically, when you're loaning somebody money in the form of a bond, the interest rate or the profit that you make is a lot lower than the profit that you would make if you invested in a stock. And so in most people's portfolio, they have a combination of stocks and bonds. And in this particular episode, we're focusing on a different type of bond. And so all the craze lately has been on I bonds or inflation protected bonds. So what is that? That's a type of federal bond. So you're loaning money to the federal government and they're saying, hey, we're going to pay you back with interest. The interesting thing about I bonds is that the interest amount changes. So the interest amounts, the amount that the federal government is going to pay you back as a profit for loaning them the money in the first place, is called interest. And that interest changes. So let's say you loan the government $1,000, right? The amount of interest or profit that you're going to make for loaning them that money changes, and it changes based on inflation. So lately inflation has gone crazy high, right? The cost of cars has increased, the cost of houses have increased, and so inflation has increased. And so because inflation has increased, the amount of interest that you're making on these bonds has increased. So, a few years ago, maybe somebody would loan somebody money to the federal government, and maybe the interest rate on that money would be 1%, 2%. Well, now because inflation has skyrocketed, the interest that you can get on those bonds is like 8 or 9%, right? And that is why everyone is all the craze about inflation protected bonds or I bonds. They're like, oh my goodness, I used to only be able to make 1% or 2% on my money, and now I can make 8 or 9% on my money. Oh my goodness, I should invest in that. And then, of course, they compare it to their stock portfolio. And we all know stocks have dipped lately. So they're logging into their Vanguard accounts, they're logging into Fidelity, and they're seeing that the whole value of their, retirement account has decreased dramatically. And then they go on Facebook and they hear about I bonds, and people are making 8 or 9% on their money, and they're like, wait a minute, maybe I should invest in that.
Start before you're ready. Start by starting. Start now.